is over, because there's just no way in the world that those two documents, found at completely different times in completely different parts of the country, could match so perfectly if it wasn't real.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. And also, of course, as you said, that this connects with Reich again. We go back to that idea, and I mean, if you will, tell us a little bit about the background on what Reich were doing out there in regards to when you say fighting UFOs. What do you mean by that?
Well, Reich had discovered what he called orgone, which is atmospheric energy, that the world and human bodies are infected with a kind of dynamic energy that could be manipulated and used for purposes, for lots of different purposes, to improve human health, to gradually increase moisture in desert areas, all kinds of environmental effects. And he had created a device called an orgone box. And inside the orgone box, the temperature inside an orgone box is always 2 or 3 degrees higher than the ambient temperature of the room. Basic scientific law of entropy is that everything is reaching a steady state, that there's a certain ambient temperature that, like if you put an ice cube in a room, it will melt. If you put, a bucket of hot water, it will cool down.
Sure.
The median state that everything reaches. Inside the orgone box, that doesn't happen. And Reich had, so you have a source of heat and energy there, a source of free heat and energy. Eventually, that got him into all kinds of trouble with the Food and Drug Administration here. They were trying to, they tried to, well, they successfully characterized the thing as a quack cancer cure.
Right.
And because one of them had been shipped over state lines, they were able to prosecute Reich and throw him in the jail, which is where he died. And they actually went out to his estate and they burned his books and destroyed his scientific equipment. It's really one of the darkest chapters in American history, actually.
Or they took the research for themselves.
They took it. Well, yeah, sure. I mean, Reich was not shy about publishing his research results, and even though his books are kind of hard to find, if you can find things that were published by his Orgone Institute Press, they've got color plates in them that show orgone energy lighting up vacuum tubes and this kind of thing.
Wow.
And he had at one point UFOs descended around his estate in Rangeley, Maine, a place called Orgonon, and left behind, interestingly enough, the same kind of slag that Crisman and Dahl had described to the investigators in the Pacific Northwest back in '47. Of course, now we're into the mid-'50s, so when it's happening to Reich.
Right.
And so he got a little obsessed with UFOs and what the UFOs meant in terms of all of his orgone research. And at the same time, he was trying to develop programs in the Southwest to bring rain, to gradually increase moisture in desert areas. And so he came up with a whole field trip idea to take new technology that he developed above and beyond the orgone boxes, things called cloudbuster guns, which had two functions, really. The main function of the cloudbuster gun was to try to manipulate the orgone energy in the atmosphere to bring rain and moisture to dried out areas. But in the process of doing that, of course, he was seeing UFOs. And he felt as if you could aim these cloudbuster guns, which look like cannons, you could aim them at these flying saucers, which he saw as, like sparkling things in the sky, he could get them to blink out. So eventually he came up, he had a whole company of people. His daughter was there, and he had, like a half a dozen different assistants out there with these orgone guns fighting UFOs in the Tucson desert. And all the while, again, reporting to the Air Force, telling them everything that he was doing.
Right.
And basically getting positive feedback to the point where at one point they wanted to report it to what was going on in the White House, and that's where you get the Cutler-Twining memo. And the Cutler-Twining memo is named after Nathan Twining was the general to whom the two investigators in the Maury Island case reported to.
Right.
Robert Cutler was actually the first national security advisor. His descendant at one time His bureaucratic descendant was Condoleezza Rice.
Oops, there we go.
and he was responsible for coming up with the famous Eisenhower speech that dealt with atoms for peace, the peacetime use of nuclear power. The phrase itself had been used many years before by Wilhelm Reich. It was appropriated by Robert Cutler and put in one of Eisenhower's speeches.
My God.
Yeah.
It's obviously a connection between all these different researchers and politicians at the time and what they were doing. And I mean, do you know if Reich, did he down any of these crafts, or I mean, he might even not even have referred to them as nuts and bolts types of craft, because
no, he believed in the nuts and bolts stuff. It's kind of hard to deal with Reich because he used his own terminology,
right?
And he felt as if whatever he was fighting was producing something he called DOR, D-O-R, which is deadly orgone radiation, which is orgone energy exposed to radioactive material. And this is really hard stuff to come by. His last book was called Contact with Space.
Right.
And it's impossible to find. I've got a copy of it, but if you can find a copy, it costs a fortune. It hasn't been reprinted. Reich was considered a madman. But if you have the book, you can see, and this is another interesting aspect of the whole case. Reich, when he takes his journey from Rangeley, Maine, down into Tucson, Arizona, he deliberately passes through Roswell, New Mexico, and he talks about the desert conditions there and the DOR, the deadly orgone radiation that he sees around him. He's basically, and this is 1955.
Right.
And you have people, even today in the skeptics community, that believe that the whole business about Roswell was all yanted up by researchers who first started their work in 1980, that it happened in 47, then you don't hear about it until some guys want to make a buck trying to come up with some crazy scenario in 1980. Well, here's 1955, and Roswell's makes his major appearance in one of Wilhelm Reich's books.
And this is also, I guess, close to the White Sands area. They were testing a lot of this equipment, right? A lot of nuclear weapons. That's kind of through that area. I think Reich kind of presented himself as the alternative to the use of nuclear energy. He had, in fact, a long correspondence with Albert Einstein. Einstein actually got one of the orgone boxes and verified everything that Reich had said, and said, wow, this is crazy because this defies the fundamental scientific law, and held on to the box for a long time. Eventually was convinced by an assistant that the temperature difference had to do with a convection in the ceiling of the room where the orgone box was placed. And then Reich writes back, I do these outdoors, and I get the same result. Right.
But at that point, Einstein kind of dropped it and never continued on the investigation. And in the end, Reich has this fabulous quote, I wish I was good enough to be able to quote it to you, but he talks about how Einstein's theories basically emptied space, and that space is actually kind of like this energetic continuum of different kinds of energies vibrating at different speeds.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally going against the norm of, well, not only at that time, but, pervasively at this time also, unfortunately, it seems.
Well, yeah, precisely. Yeah, the prevailing view is how to use the energy that we're discovering because of the knowledge that we've acquired about subatomic particles and the way atoms work, how to use that, not, for life and learning and space exploration, but for doom, death, and destruction.
Right. Well, I mean, it's so many different topics here that are absolutely fascinating, and as you said, you will be addressing two of these on the Beyond Knowledge Conference. Looking forward to that very much. I think this is a good time to round things up here for this time, Ken. But before we do that, I want you to mention a little bit about your website and how people can hook up with some of the material that you have out there, books, DVDs, etc.
Okay, yeah, sure. The website is steamshovelpress.com, and it's for a regularly produced magazine. But lately, and what I'll be bringing to the conference, the new product line, as it were, I've got a series of videos. One of them is of the lecture I did at Conspiracy Con in San Jose last year. Another one is some of my recent television appearances. I've got the famous writer Arthur Kessler discussing a concept called bisociation as it relates to conspiracy theories. All kinds of neat stuff, and you can click on that at the banner at the top of the thing. but also there's a regular editorial section, that we, whenever there's excess writing about what I'm doing, it gets posted up there, so there's new content there.
Nice.
At steamshovelpress.com. And also I have a new book coming up in the fall called Secret and Suppressed Volume 2. Jim Keith actually created the first Secret and Suppressed, and it collects together all these kinds of samizdat and underground literature that'll point you into different directions, alternatives to your kind of mainstream thinking.
Fascinating. And what you said, this the coming at autumn now or summer?
Yeah, it should be out. We're hoping to get it out in time for the elections in November.
Right.
And it's Feral House is the publisher, Feral House. I should also mention that the current book they have, which you didn't even touch on, is called Conspiracy Files.
Right.
It's like an overview of the whole conspiracy culture in world history. It's only available in Australia. I'm sure you can order it online, but it's by Murdoch Books in Australia.
Is that Rupert Murdoch?
No, it's not. I know that much.
Good.
Not part of that conspiracy.
Right, exactly. That's good. Okay, so again, the website is steamshovelpress.com. Fascinating having you on, Ken, and again, looking forward to very much seeing your talks at Beyond the Knowledge Conference.
Okay, fabulous, Henry. Good to talk to you.
Thank you very much for coming on.
God
Take care.
has a plan, and the Bible unfolds that wonderful plan through the message of prophecy. God sent Jesus into this world to be our Savior, and that Christ is returning someday soon to unfold the wonderful plan of eternity for my life and your life. As long as we're cooperating with God by accepting Jesus Christ as our personal Lord and Savior. Unless the Lord does return in the coming 7 days, we'll see you next time here on 17APR Bible Prophecy.
Don't start that blasphemy.
Remember what my pops told me.
The new word. Follow me.
Remember what my pops told me. My family tree consists of drug dealers, thugs, and killers. Struggling, known to hustle, screaming, fuck they feelings. I got advice from my father, all he told me was this: nigga, get off your ass if you plan to be rich. There's 10 rules to the game, but I'll share with you too. No, niggas gon' hate you for whatever you do. Now rule 1, get your cash on MOB. That's money over bitches cause they breed envy. Now rule 2 is a hard one. Watch for phonies. Keep your enemies close, nigga. Watch your homies.